Okay, so our patient has Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, which is a defect in the mitochondrial DNA, resulting in maternally transmitted loss of vision. It affects the optic nerves. It has a gender bias towards males, 4-1, and it usually has an onset from 20 years old and beyond. The disease has an incomplete penetrance, which means that even if you have the genetic defect, it is not guaranteed that you'll develop the disease. It needs a combination of lifestyle factors. So clinical features regarding LON: there is a painless acute or subacute loss of vision in both eyes, and you have deep central scotomas. That means that you lose central vision in both eyes. You also experience disc edema and hyperemia. Hyperemia means an expanded extent of angiogenesis in the area. And peripapillary telangiectasia, which is all the superficial vessels in the choroid layer and just under like the iris become dilated, so it's visible redness. As you can see by the the little pedigree on the right-hand side of the screen, LON is a maternally transmitted disease because it is a mitochondrial defect, and this happens because only a mother's mitochondrial DNA is passed on, because in the ovum that contains all the mitochondrial DNA. Sperm do not carry mitochondrial DNA. The genetic basis for the disease is it is a point mutation in the mitochondrial genome at loci ND1, ND4, ND4L, or ND6. Each of these loci code for a subunit in one of the electron transport complexes within the electron transport chain. You there with?
Sorry, this is from the slide before. Is there a time when it is painful? It said painless acute something. There
Painless loss
like
of
loss
vision?
of vision. Can you have painful loss of vision? Does it hurt?
I mean,
That sounds concerning.
no. Okay.
Necessarily, but some people.
Necrosis is associated with inflammation and pain, right? So there's no inflammation. It's apoptotic. Checkmate.
I've just never heard of painful loss of vision.
I mean, what if you get necrosis? Like, what if you...
I feel like it's a vision loss is separate from the pain.
What about retinoblastoma? What if you get, like, a cancer in your
I
eyes?
just thought I'd check. It just sounded very odd.
Okay.
That was
Well, it's painless.
it's not like I'm trying to correct you. I've never heard of painful vision.
You ever watch Daredevil? Jeez.
Stab yourself in the eye, that's painful vision.
No. Daredevil had, like, fucking radioactive shit in his eye. Okay, where was I? Oh, yeah, okay. The 4-point mutations replace, they're missense mutations. They replace serine with arginine in the subunits of the mitochondrial complex. This replacement renders them ineffective. So what that means is when you have an ineffective complex 1 in the electron transport chain, it fails to transport the electron it has to complex 3 down the line inside the mitochondria. When it fails to transport the electron, it drops the electron into the matrix. And when you drop an electron into the matrix, which is an oxygen-rich environment, that electron interacts with the oxygen and forms superoxides, which are reactive oxygen species. The accumulation of reactive oxygen species in the mitochondrial matrix eventually reaches a threshold where pores start to form in the mitochondria, called the membrane permeability transport pores, MPTP in this diagram. Those pores allow cytochrome C and calcium to leak out of the mitochondria. Both of these molecules are toxic. They will lead to cell death. Cytochrome C activates caspases, which then bind together with APAF1 and produce apoptosomes. These apoptosomes, trigger apoptosis. Okay. A key thing to note here is that this increased degree of reactive oxygen species production isn't enough to cause apoptosis in most cells. But when combined with environmental factors like tobacco smoking, alcoholism, or anything that adds reactive oxygen species, it overcomes the threshold and then forms these pores. So that's why we mentioned that it was an incomplete penetrance. And it's also believed to be why this disease is onset in 20s to 30s in men, because it's meant to be associated with the fraternity lifestyle, where you go to college, you get drunk, you smoke, and you get lon. Okay, so low to moderate levels of ROS is essential for physiological cell cycle proliferation, differentiate migration. But an exacerbation of this ROS production leads to the cell death. This is just this is an image of, at the left, there is an optic nerve with all its nerve fibers in a healthy 20-year-old adult. And to the right, there is a lon optic nerve, and you can see that the bundle fibers are significantly decreased. The actual number is about 90% of decrease. So, pass it over to Christelle.